in the garden talking about greed. Not our greed here, but greed, the motion picture. Michael Winterbottom, Steve Coogan in the leading role. Michael Winterbottom, the writer, director. Um, Not a very successful film, I'm afraid. And not because I say so. Critics seem to agree. They gave it a poor reception, if you will, for various reasons. It could have been wonderful because this is one of the themes of our days, exposed indeed at the end of the film when they say the first, I don't know, 36 billionaires, 36 richest people have as much or more than 3.6 billion, whatever the figures are. We all know what that means. Some very rich, filthy rich, have more than half the world put together or more, which is indeed preposterous. And that's greed. That's the main theme of the film, wherein we have this British tycoon, a man who used to own a chain of stores, for fashion, and that is also exposed. So, by the way, we have to speak of the merits of the film. It points out, termină măgarule, points out to some of the catastrophic differences of injustices which we have to face, and in a way it is peculiar and sarcastic because we do have some things here after the pandemic. Who knows what is left? And across the wall there is a separating wall, this gated community with people who think they're big shots. They're not really, but they just want to acclaim. And over the fence there's some poor people, some shacks, and not what we see in Greed at one point. At one point, this rich man, based on someone, Sir Henry something, Henry Green maybe, who has a fortune and has had some used some financial tricks, did awful things. Speaking of fashion, they highlight this, the fact that in Bangladesh they work for 50p pence or whatever per day, in crowded conditions. There have been scandals when some of those places burn, and they took many lives with them. And at the same time, this rich guy and others benefit. They just use slaves. That's where the film is getting exaggerated, and it's pathetic to some extent when the guy wants to have an amphitheater built by Bulgarians eventually, and for his 60th birthday to have this showdown to invite Elton John, whatever that. That's also somewhat amusing because they end up using, when celebrities done it now, not all but many, they use lookalikes. And he is funny in his vicious way sometimes. Who's that? Who's that? George Michael is fucking dead. He's using fucking a lot, and showing some business acumen, of course, emphasizing that you need to be ruthless if you are to get to the top and make money and give jobs to some people. He's also highlighting the fact that the likes of Bono and so many, most all the rich avoid paying tax. Bono speaks about saving the world and does some great work, but declares he's not willing to pay so much tax, and he's parking it in Monte Carlo, like so many others. In the commission where he's invited to be interviewed to speak about some of the bad things discovered, he also speaks about the names we know: Apple, Google, Starbucks, who pay, I don't know, $1,000 in tax, whereas they navigate with their millions through the Netherlands, Ireland. Ireland has given them a lot of tax incentives, making them pay nothing for their businesses. And that's the good side. That's speaking of such things is good. But when it becomes too pathetic, the woman who's always complaining that she's a slave, and yes, she has a bad life, but it's when you're pushing it, it becomes it doesn't have the effect it's supposed to have. It becomes overwhelming or something. The Syrian refugees on the beach over there, that's not so well crafted, I think. I don't know about you. And some other things like the lion, also the digitalized lion, which is good. I mean, they could have used at another age that's what they have would have done, use the real one and abusing him in the process. But this is clearly a digitalized one, which eventually, let's not say what happens, but will be a presence there which doesn't seem to serve too great a point. Yes, excesses, the excess of the reach, but when there's the excess of the filmmaker, that's not working too well.